And so this is a situation that needs to be studied and be constantly reviewed and analyzed. So this morning, we look at one perspective from Venezuela, which is out of a news outlet called Venice Bombing of Caracas, and going beyond the professed U.S. interest in the country's natural resources. We have to understand the position, the ideas, and the role played by elites in shaping key areas of national interest, including the concept of sovereignty, the nation's resources, the model of the state, and Venezuelan foreign relations in their own image over the 19th and 20th centuries. This meant the imposition of a political thought and socio-economic model that ended up above all benefiting the Spanish descendants or the Creole oligarchy, which has been known in colonial times as Mantuanos. Venezuela emerged from the 16th century Spanish conquest as what is known in Venezuelan historiography as the colonial implanted society, one that it is a settler formation. At its zenith, it was a Creole elite with ample economic privileges, but with a highly restricted political reach, limited to participation in municipal town halls cabildos. This privileged sector was a dominant political class in colonial society for 3 centuries, with deep Hispanic cultural roots, a notion of superiority towards the popular classes alongside a complex of inferiority towards peninsular Spaniards who controlled the political and administrative affairs of the colony. Between 1810 and 1816, the Creole elite played a leading role in the national, promising freedom, land, and citizenship to all those who answered the patriotic call. This revolutionary act, like many others in Bolivar's act, would provoke splits and internal conflicts among military leaders and patriotic politicians, which would later lead to the separation of Gran Colombia in 1830 and the creation of Venezuela as an independent state. Likewise, the founding of the new Venezuelan Republic in that same year by the Creole elites was essentially based on anti-Bolivarian political and ideological foundations and would undergo the model of the state and the socio-economic system to be maintained until the 20th century. The main political positions assumed by Bolivar during his lifetime certainly did not please certain social sectors within independent America. So I will stop here with these 2 paragraphs and we can begin a discussion of the role of the elites in Venezuelan history, especially those Creole elites, those who, and what people must understand is that a Creole, even though in the Caribbean, like in Trinidad, Indians will call Africans Creole because they replace the term African for Creole. And historically and culturally, a Creole was a European born in the Americas. It was not an African person. And what they did is they basically appropriated African culture and created this culture called Creole culture, which diminished the African culture and highlighted elements of European culture. That's why Caribbean societies, to a large extent, have this conflict of Eurocentricity and the African-centered culture. So this is in context of what happened in Venezuela historically, and this writer now positions this as a kind of reality or context of what is happening in Venezuela. So I will turn
Brother Echo, yeah. I really value leading with that story and this author's framing, which different from
or made me better understand the significance of what's going on in Venezuela from an African perspective. Because when we talk about the kidnapping of Maduro and Celia, his wife, I believe that's her name. Yes. We often can just look at it. We know we're in solidarity, but they're not obviously African presenting. However, if we look much deeper, one of the things that Simeon has kind of pointed out to me is that what's going on in Venezuela now could be seen as a betrayal of the African Revolution. the Pan-African Revolution. And I was like, what do you mean? And he went back to some of the history that this story uncovers, the forming of Gran Colombia. And actually, we have to go further back to look at the role that Bolivar also played in what some would argue was betraying Haiti. So that the region has always kind of been underpinned by African revolutionary struggle. And then the story talks about the role of the elites, but also the racialization of the revolutions that have been waged in that part of the world, and the role of the Creole population in particular. So I'm very fascinated. Promises of emancipation were not fully implemented. And so all I'm saying is that this story causes us to look much deeper into the role of African people in the revolutionary struggles in southern Abya. And I think this story really points us in that direction. So there's lots more, I think, connections.
Short comment, the next story. Short comment, the next story. I try to make sure you cover all 11.
I wanted to share one thing. I was at a conference, a Zoom conference a couple of years ago. And one of the persons on that conference was Adnan Chavez, who is the late Hugo Chavez's brother. And in making his presentation, he made a point on culture. One of the points he made was we must move forward with our mestizo culture. One of the brothers of the Caribbean challenged him and said, we don't want to be mestizos. There must be a respect for African culture. And this is an important part of the struggle that a lot of people sometimes miss, even some Marxists miss. Sailor James, for example, broke with the American Communist Party on the race question because they were saying class was the only relevant definition for our struggle. And Sailor said, no, you cannot tell a black people experiencing racism about class struggle, right? So what has happened in South America is that this countries. And one of the reasons they said that they hated Chavez because Chavez identified with his Africanness. One time he said, this nose I have here comes from Africa. And so that's what I'm saying. We don't know what is happening in Venezuela. So a lot of perspectives have to be analyzed in order to get a context and an understanding of what is happening in Venezuela. And when you look at Venezuela now, there's a significant African population in Venezuela, especially in the coastal communities, but you never see them, you know, and so these are relevant issues to begin to analyze and to understand at this point in time.
Valid observation, Brother Akko.
So the next article is out of Jamaica. The headline is on the education system, and the headline is Jamaica's Curricle Education System, a battle for cultural sovereignty. It begins with, there are few tragedies more enduring than an education system that systematically undermines the very people it claims to uplift in Jamaica, where more than 11% of the adult population remains functionally literate. The consequence is not merely academic failure, but the slow burial of potential. Generations of children are being consigned to low-wage labor, economic uncertainty, destroyed hopes and dreams. This crisis is not the result of scarce resources. It is the outcome of deliberate mismanagement, corruption, and a colonial mindset that continues to shape the Jamaican society. And the subheading, elitism, cultural and social stagnation. Let us be clear. This is not accidental. From its inception, Jamaica's education system was designed to serve a narrow elite while disciplining the majority into obedience. As Professor Miller and others have long demonstrated, decades of reform have failed to close the gap between the privileged and the working class. Instead, schooling continues to socialize our children into submission, training them to fit neatly into a global capitalist order where their creativity is extracted, their labor exploited, and their aspirations contained. Right? Despite high enrollment, a United Nations study has found Jamaica's learning outcomes to be dangerously weak. Only 20% of teachers are university graduates, and digital literacy remains an afterthought in a world increasingly defined by technology. Meanwhile, we continue to fund a system that reliably produces illiteracy, underemployment, and social stagnation. The third paragraph headline is a corrupt-driven curricular education system. The crisis in education cannot be separated from Jamaica's broader political economy. Government officials routinely cite budget constraints to justify chronic underinvestment, but this explanation collapses under scrutiny. The problem is not scarcity, it is priority. The Auditor General reports from 2012 to 2023 documents billions of dollars lost to waste, fraud, and corruption across state agencies, including the Ministry of Education. Procurement scandals, inflated contracts, and vanity projects drain public funds while classrooms crumble and teachers struggle without basic resources. This is a government that finds ample money for foreign travel, consultants, and ceremonial excess, yet pleads poverty when asked to invest in children. Education has become a curricle, a lucrative feeding trough for political insiders rather than a vehicle for national development. Despite the rhetoric of reform, outcomes worsen, inequality deepens, and the gulf between elite institutions and underfunded public school grows even wider. At its core, this dysfunction reflects the logic of capitalism itself. Jamaica's education system is not designed to cultivate critical thinkers, innovators, or self-determining citizens. It is engineered to produce a compliant workforce for a global economy that thrives on cheap labor and limited horizons. Western capitalist nations preach meritocracy and opportunity, yet actively structure education to reproduce class hierarchies at home and dependency abroad. Minds are not developed, they are conditioned. And I will stop here because this applies to the entire Caribbean, even though it is a Jamaican issue. It is a wider Caribbean issue. And two important points: the point of obedience. We are trained to be obedient and subservient to foreign interests. Okay, and that is a critical point, and I will just make that comment.
Sister YaYa, Sister YaYa, no, Sister Esther. You're on mute.
Sorry, very interesting story. And I think it's Norris, I believe, is the author, Norris MacDonald, yes, where he identifies the continuity between colonial era educational design and present day dysfunction. And I think about this in terms of what some of us refer to as the Maangamizi, which shows us how chattel enslavement and colonialism aren't historical artifacts, but they're actually living structures. What I find interesting around this article, however, is for me as a reparationist, I would like to see some reparations framing. Because although he diagnoses the colonial wound, the remedy for that, I think we need to sort of do further elaboration on. So yeah, that's what I would say about this story. And I think also the role of elite capture and movement capture, there's some further analysis we could provide there, because we can, I think he very well criticizes the political class for treating education as a feeding through. But I believe that there needs to be further interrogation as to how the very reform mechanisms that he might advocate can themselves become vehicles for what has been identified as elite intermediation.
Respect, Sister Esther. And I think we really need to be, I think we really need to be more vocal and honest about it, and I appreciate what Sister Esther says. Well, the one thing for analyze one situation, but then to come up with really forward-thinking solutions, which would be very inclusive of the majority of the people and from the bottom up instead of top down. So, big respect for this story to select Brother Akko.
Well, one comment I would make on that you made, Sister YaYa, is the conflict people of African descent have with the church. In the sense that even though at times we proclaim to be revolutionary, we do interpret divinity through the eyes of the European. It was one of my contradictions with Venezuela when I was seeing even people like Chavez making the sign of the cross and Maduro, right? You know, I never said anything, but it's like, to me, if you're a revolutionary, you have to challenge the church, the so-called Roman Catholic Church. And what has happened historically is when the conquistadores came, the soldiers, they tried to convert. So the soldiers were beating you physically, and the church was beating you mentally and spiritually. And the church continues to play that role today, despite the fact that it does some charitable things here and there. And that is an issue in Caribbean society that we are yet to confront. This is why the Haitian Revolution is the most profound revolution in this hemisphere, because it challenges the very spiritual nature of European spirituality. It challenges that by imposing voodoo as a spiritual. In other words, they saw God as black through the eye of Africa and not through some filtered construct of Eurocentricity. And that is something we are yet to confront in the Caribbean. And that is a reality that we soon come to understand, that the church in many ways is not our friend.
So there, mic drop moment. Thanks, Brother Akko, Sister YaYa. Next story.
Next story is an article written on Haiti, even though it's not of a Haitian newspaper, but it's very important. And it's called Haiti's Long Struggle and Why the Reparations Movement is a Public Health Matter. It begins, Haiti has a long, painful history that continues to shape people's lives today. Long ago, when the land was called Saint-Domingue, it was known as the Pearl of the Antilles because it made huge profits for European powers. But this wealth came from one of the harshest systems of slavery in the world. Before the famous Haitian Revolution in 17 plantations more profitable. Their medical and agricultural research supported the slave system and supported the treatment of African and indigenous peoples as less than human. This violence harmed not only the bodies of enslaved people, but also their minds, their culture, their knowledge, and their communities. These wounds did not disappear after Haiti won its independence in 1804. Instead, they shaped the country's future in ways that are still visible today. More than 220 years later, Haiti continues to struggle with extreme poverty, political instability, and public health problems. These challenges are tied to the long history of colonialism, the attempted genocide of the indigenous people, the trafficking and enslavement of African ancestors, and the ways powerful countries have continued to control weaker nations. One of the most damaging effects after independence was the heavy reparations that France forced Haiti to pay in 1825 to French slave owners. France forced Haiti to pay 90 million gold francs as compensation for the loss of enslaved people and plantations, according to the French economist Thomas Piketty. This amount equaled about 3 years of Haiti's entire production at the time and would be more than 30 billion euros today. Haiti spent more than a century paying this money at a cost to investment in hospitals, schools, roads, or clean water system. Instead, the money enriched France and kept Haiti trapped in poverty. This history is important today because many people in Haiti and around the world are calling on France to return the money Haiti was forced to pay. These demands are not only about money, they are also about repairing the damage caused by centuries of injustice. So I would, there are some other subtitles like the outbreaks of infectious disease, unsafe water, short life expectancy, high homicide rate, high infant mortality rate, high maternal mortality rate, and more female and male cancers, widespread food insecurity, high blood pressure and high disease, and so on. And these health problems show past injustice continues to shape Haiti's present. So I'll end here, and we can, continue the discussion around at this time.
Respect. We'll have to take our first break, so Sister Esther will have more time to process. And then we come back. Sister Esther will share her comments, thoughts on that piece on IT. Break time. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
It is truly a proud day for us here in the village as we inaugurate this rehabilitated Bully Tree Falls Community Center, a building that has long stood at the heart of our community. For generations, this center has been more than just a structure of concrete and steel. It has been a place where memories were made and lives were celebrated. It has hosted countless community gatherings, quinceaños celebrations, weddings, birthday parties, family reunions, meetings, and events that brought us together as one people.
I'm often criticized for projects like this, going to say, why is tourism investing in a community center? And I often say I'm not investing in a community center, I'm investing in the community, I'm investing in our people.
May this center continue to stand strong as a symbol of community, resilience, and togetherness for many years to come.
Sounds, and hosted by Kenny G. Don't forget to purchase your raffle tickets for the grand prize of a brand new scooter cycle. Entrance fee for the Bob Marley Tribute Festival and Concert is only $15 in advance, $20 at the gate. For advance tickets and table and chairs reservations, call Dara at
Finally, a postpaid plan for 3 people. Introducing Smart Trio. Why pay for mobile service alone when you can share and save? Get unlimited national calls, text, plus 100 gigabytes of shared data. And the best part? It's only $135. That's right, as low as $45 per person. Perfect for small families, couples, or close friends. Smart Trio. 3 lines, 1 smart choice. Sign up now and you could win a Trio getaway to San Pedro for 3. Visit us at www.smart-bz.com for more information or sign up at any showroom today. Smart, bringing people together.
At Atlantic Bank, your convenience is our priority. Our contact center is designed to enhance your banking experience with a wide range of customer service options. You save time and effort. You can easily call in to block or unblock your debit and credit cards, perform account inquiries, and access detailed card information. Whether you need assistance with online banking, merchant support, or general inquiries, our team is ready to help. For added convenience, if all operators are busy, you can leave your number and an operator will return your call as soon as possible to ensure you receive the support you need. Depending on your transaction type, we may need to verify your identity through a set of security questions. And remember, Atlantic Bank will never request your username or password for Atlantic Online via phone call, text, or email, ensuring your personal information remains safe and secure. Our support team is available Monday to Friday from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. in both English
and the LED experts at Brothers Habet and Habet help you find the best LED solution with colors for every room and mood, starting as low as $6.95. You can even get LED strips for home, office, and industrial use. So say goodbye to fluorescent tubes forever. And because they use up to 90% less energy, you save money. Money you can spend on other things. So head to Brothers Habet or Habet and Habet today. You can also call, email, or Facebook us. Have a brilliant day.
Brand keeps you connected to the culture, the people, and the rhythm of Belize.
The best Creme FM.
Download the Creme Radio app today. Available on iOS and Android. Live from back of the Sing fans. It's the Creme Radio app. 96.5, keep the fire blazing.
This one goes out to all patriots, all people who love them country bad, love them homeland. We'll never give it up to another nation. This happy we da fear. Nobody give it to no Guatemala.
Second segment of Sunday Review for this morning, Sunday, February 8th. Sister Esther, Brother Akko, Sister YaYa, reviewing Caribbean's news stories for this past week. Sister Esther, your 2 cents from the IET's news report.
Yeah, I mean, I really kind of appreciated this story in the way it identifies what's called the biopsychosocial ecological model. Which is quite useful by insisting that health encompasses biological, psychological, social, and environmental dimensions. And so what it does is that it resists the reductionism that typically characterizes both public health interventions and reparations proposals that focus narrowly on financial transfers. I think the community voice data that is provided is also very valuable. However, what I would say about what's missing in the story from what I could hear is the framing is still state to state and quote unquote expert led. So for instance, advocating that France pays, professionals implement, and there's no question really about who controls the process, the reparatory process. So community members were consulted through focus groups, but aren't positioned as governors of their own repair. And I think that's a little bit problematic. And I also feel that the piece isolates Haiti's case to France when there was US occupation, Duvalier era, Western backing, ongoing international financial institution control are all part of the continuum of the Maangamizi. And so I think, you know, that's what would need to be included, I think, to give this a true holistic framing.
Sister Esther, can you briefly share what the Maangamizi is?
So the Maangamizi is a key Swahili term that speaks to the destruction of African people. And when we say destruction, it doesn't mean that we've been totally eliminated. Obviously, we're still here, but in the context of genocide and ethnocide. And with ethnocide, which is less known than genocide, you physically remain, but your cultural foundations, your essential foundations of life, your economic system, your cultural foundations, all your social institutions have been very much interfered with by whoever has colonized you. And so when we talk about the Maangamizi, it covers, you know, the chattel enslavement, colonialism, neo-colonialism, the war crimes, the total dispossession, and the fact that we are living in societies where we're still trying to restore ourselves and recover ourselves. And so it's a collective term that comes from Kiswahili that speaks to the continuum of oppression that we as a group have faced, and therefore that continuum is modern day. It's not just about the past. And when we talk about reparations, people often go to the past, but what this story does is bring it right into the present in terms of looking at legacies that descendants of African enslaved people and colonized people, dispossessed people, continue to face today.
Big thanks, Sister Esther. Brother Akko?
Very interesting what Sister Esther said. I was trying to get a chapter. I'm reading this book, rereading this book, Discourse on Colonialism by Ames Césaire. And Césaire makes exactly that point. He said, in defense of African civilization, he says, I'm speaking of civilizations where food production was destroyed, where natural economies were destroyed. And that is a part of the whole process that we sometimes, understate or overlook in terms of the destruction, not just the psychological, but even today in Africa, foods that, kept us alive for hundreds of years are now eradicated because the Europeans wanted to plant tea or coffee or something else. And so that is an important part. So our taste patterns and our biology has to some extent been changed by the process of colonization. And so it's an important point I wanted to have. I couldn't find a particular chapter, paragraph, but Césaire made that point very, very early in the 1950s.
Thanks, Brother Akko.
All right. So the next article we are going to read is also, and we all know that Cuba is under severe pressure right now. The oil shipments from Venezuela seems to have stopped, and even Mexico, which promised to provide fuel, seem to be sort of backsliding on this a bit. But the Cuban government continues to lead the people and inspire. This article is a very interesting article. It's called, the headline is Neither Future Servants Nor Dazzled Villagers. And it begins on December 20th, 1989, the United States invaded Panama. And the person's, the writer is saying, I will never forget that anguished night watching Cuban television until the wee hours of the morning as I followed the tragic events, the machine gunning of civilians in the densely populated areas of El Chorrillo, the bombings and the fighting, the arrest of Noriega, and the destruction of a sister nation. 26 years have passed and the script is repeating itself with the logical differences in actors and circumstances. But the pretexts used are almost the same. And the threatening tone goes beyond the borders of the unjustly attacked country to extend to all of our America, with the cynicism and naturalness of someone referring to their backyard. Again, the world's policeman is arrogating to itself the right to violate a sovereign country and kidnap its president, trampling on all the norms of international law and without a single convincing argument. Meanwhile, a wave of protests, emotions, and mixed reactions has arisen around the world in recent hours. Those of us who know something about history and the anti-imperialist thinking of our forefathers cannot help but think of lapidary prophetic phrases such as that of Bolivar in his letter to Patricio Campbell, in which he rightly asserted that the United States seemed destined by Providence to plague our America with misery in the name of freedom. Today, threats have multiplied in this insane arrogance of that contemporary version of Nero who governs the United States. The triumphalist rhetoric is not new, nor the promises of freedom to the country it has just bombed, and also to Mexico, Colombia, and of course Cuba. The obsession of all the presidents of that country, even for the early days when they ceased to be 13 English colonies and became the United States. No less monstrous are the statements made by certain Venezuelans and Cubans. Some celebrate their aggression against their homeland, while others eagerly await Cuba undergoing the same bloody experience. Many of these despicable individuals live in their countries of origin and display a shameful and cynical desire for annexing migrants every day without the slightest consideration, displaying racism and brutality inherited from the ethnic cleansing typical of medieval barbarism or 20th century fascism. I do not question people's right to live where they want, for whatever reasons, personal, family, economic, or even political. You may like a government more or less. You may not sympathize with the president of a particular country. But from there to consider a direct attack, a war of plunder against a sovereign people, the distance is enormous. Today it is Venezuela. A few years ago it was Iraq, Syria, Libya. Anyone who has something coveted by the interests of a decadent and desperate empire, which in its collapse seeks to drag the world down with it. Tomorrow it could be anyone else because no one is safe. And that is the couple paragraphs I would read at this point.
Thanks, Brother Aka. Sister Esther?
Greetings. Yeah, very interesting story. And what I like about this story is that it brings out explicitly the role and it refuses to separate US foreign aggression from its domestic racism and deportation regime. What I do note, however, and I think again, this would make the story more interesting, is the fact that Africaneity is entirely absent. So the piece frames imperial aggression as a Latin American story without acknowledging that Venezuela other types of indigeneity in the analysis, because without doing so, we risk reproducing the racial hierarchies within so-called Latin America itself, mestizo nationalism that renders Black and indigenous peoples invisible while even claiming to defend them. So who benefits from an anti-imperialism that doesn't name racial capitalism, for instance?
Valid, Sister Esther. Brother Akko?
Well, it's such a valid point. I was looking at a documentary a couple months ago about Africans in Argentina and how they try to retain their culture. One of the points one of them was making is that the former president, Carlos Menem, I think was his name, he made a speech and said there are no Black people in Argentina. And they said here they were, Black people who are dark in skin color, and he said they don't want to embrace that. So he said we are Hispanics. So we said we are Latin American. Latin is a language of the European. So you are basically highlighting Eurocentric ideas. So even a revolutionary sense, when you say the word Hispanic and Latin America, to me, you are imposing Eurocentricity on the very struggle that you are claiming you want to fight for ending oppression and so on. So in your language, you are not recognizing using those terminologies are actually Eurocentric terminology that was imposed on us, in this part of the world.
Question, Brother Akko and Sister Esther. What would be, for you as an individual, the acceptable terminology to describe that geographical space that we may refer to? I know it's oftentimes we say the global south or Abayala. What would be, as aware people, how would you best describe that geographical location?
For me, North and South America.
But it's one America.
Yeah, but there's a northern part. But that's why Jose Marti always call it our America. He never used any other term. He says our. He call it Nuestra America, our America. You understand? Bolivar fought to liberate the entire American continent. You know. So I usually use the term North America or South America, not to refer to the United States and Canada, and the rest South America.
Thanks, Brother Akko. And you, Sister Esther?
So for me, I would prefer or use the term Abya as an indigenous term, which I believe originates from the Guna people of Panama and Colombia. And it's a term that is used by many indigenous movements as a decolonial alternative to the term America. So I believe that whilst the term America refers to the continent that was apparently named after Amerigo Vespucci, Abya symbolizes indigenous resistance, sovereignty, and a rejection of Eurocentric naming conventions. So many people in the region who are indigenous refer to it as Abya, and I would, as a
according to world statistics, light pollution can be defined according to world statistics. Light pollution can be defined as the excessive, misdirected, or misused use of artificial lights at night. In St. Vincent and the Grenadines, light pollution is seldom reported, hence the low levels of education and prevention. Some examples of light pollution may occur due to glare, which is defined as brightness that causes visual discomfort and may reduce low visibility. Light trespass, which may be termed as unwanted lights, where it is not permitted or authorized, such as private dwellings, and clutter, which is a grouping of lights that may be excessive and confusing. This article will shed light on its impacts, causes, and preventive measures to reduce light pollution. Light pollution, along with many other forms of pollution, can be detrimental to humans and animals alike. Light pollution can affect humans in many ways, for example, by causing sleep deprivation. Humans require a maximum of 8 hours for optimum health. Without sleep, humans become irritable and may not function optimally during daily activities, hindering their overall well-being. Additionally, light pollution can destroy the ecosystem, with maybe hinder some crops and food insecurities. For many, although light is pertinent, in the process of photosynthesis and pollination, too many lights can destroy and retard plant growth and development. Also, many artificial light sources can destroy wildlife. These creatures, like humans, need to procreate and live peacefully within their natural environment. For example, turtle nesting and the migration of
product of development models that have been imposed on the Caribbean nations through structural adjustment, tourism-driven economies, and imported infrastructure models designed for northern contexts. You know, who installed those street lights? Whose commercial interests drive the signage? What development model is SVG following? And who sets its terms? From a Planet Repairs perspective, which is where I think the story has the most untapped potential, pollution sits squarely at the intersection of cognitive justice, reparatory justice, and environmental justice. So cognitive justice asks what Indigenous and African knowledge systems about living in balance with natural light cycles are being overridden by imported Eurocentric development models. Reparatory justice asks who profits from the commercial and industrial lighting causing the pollution, and who bears the health and ecological costs. And an environmental justice framing asks, why are small island developing states, who are least responsible for the climate and ecological crisis, reproducing the environmental mistakes of the nations that created it?
Thank you, Sister Esther. Brother Akko, I tell you, Sister Esther mind just absolutely amazed me. I'm like, how the hell? Esther, in at the moment, could pull all that thing together. Esther, we have to talk about that because some people might be born with that ability, but because of my sister, I know her. Esther making know watch this how years of work and sacrifice and study and training.
Quality materials. Quality materials. Remember to wash your hands with clean running water from your faucet. We have kitchen and bathroom faucets in various styles and finishes. Whether for installation or maintenance, make sure to use recommended PVC cleaner, solvent, and Teflon tape to fix or prevent leaks. We also have the tools to get the job done. For all your residential, commercial, or industrial plumbing needs, shop at Benny's. Quality and savings.
Finally, a postpaid plan for 3 people. Introducing Smart Trio. Why pay for mobile service alone when you can share and save? Get unlimited national calls, texts, plus 100 gigabytes of shared data. And the best part? It's only $135. That's right, as low as $45 per person. Perfect for small families, couples, or close friends. Smart Trio. 3 lines, 1 smart choice. Sign up now and you could win a Trio getaway to San Pedro for 3. Visit us at www.smart-bz.com for more information or sign up at any showroom today. Smart, bringing people together.
En Atlantic Bank, tu comodidad es nuestra prioridad. Nuestro centro de contacto está diseñado para mejorar tu experiencia bancaria, con una amplia gama de opciones de servicio al cliente. Ahorras tiempo y esfuerzo. Puedes llamar fácilmente para bloquear o desbloquear tus tarjetas de débito y crédito, realizar consultas de cuentas y acceder a información detallada de tus tarjetas. Ya sea que necesites asistencia con la banca en línea, apoyo para comercios o consultas generales, nuestro equipo está listo para ayudarte. Para mayor comodidad, si todos los operadores están ocupados, puedes dejar tu número y un operador te devolverá la llamada lo antes posible para asegurarse de que recibas el apoyo que necesitas. Para mayor seguridad, es posible que necesitemos verificar tu identidad con un conjunto de preguntas sencillas. Recuerda, Atlantic Bank nunca solicitará tu nombre de tu usuario ni contraseña de Atlantic Online por llamada telefónica, mensaje de texto o correo electrónico, asegurando que tu información personal permanezca segura y protegida. Nuestro equipo de apoyo está disponible de lunes a viernes, de 8 a.m. a 6 p.m., en inglés y en español. Simplemente marca al 223-1212. Esta es la línea dedicada para nuestro centro de contacto. Atlantic Bank se compromete a brindarte un servicio excepcional y las herramientas que necesitas para administrar tus finanzas de manera conveniente y segura. Aprovecha al máximo nuestro servicio del centro de contacto.
Atlantic Bank, building the future together.
John Breseno, Prime Minister, thank you very much for the opportunity to have served as the commander of one of our armed forces in Belize. It gives me great pleasure and honor to have served in this capacity as the commandant of an elite organization, the members of the Belize Coast Guard. Thank you for your dedication to duty. Thank you for giving the Coast Guard and Belize your utmost best. Thank you for being an exemplary to this country.
Admiral Bennett, you have led with dedication and unwavering commitment to Belize's safety and security. On behalf of a grateful nation, I thank you for your service, your sacrifice, and your leadership. Admiral Soberanis, you assume command with our confidence, support, and expectations that you will lead the Coast Guard to even greater excellence.
As I assume command of the Belize Coast Guard, I stand before you acutely aware of the magnitude of this responsibility, and I'm deeply humbled by the trust placed in me to lead our nation's maritime guardians. The Belize Coast Guard exists for one fundamental purpose: to safeguard our nation's maritime domain. This is not an abstract concept. It is a sacred trust given to us by the government and people of Belize.
We've got the plumbing and electrical. We've got the paints and the brush and light fixtures. We've got steel, cement, and tiles galore. We've got everything. And builders hardware, variety, and quality, quantity. And builders hardware, builders who build with a passion and skill. Go to builders hardware.
Bad love them homeland. We'll never get
Welcome back to the final segment of Sunday Review for this morning. Sister Esther, Brother Akko, Sister YaYa. And so far we're done do 5 out of 11 stories. So Brother Akko, the 6th story out of the Dominican Republic. Tell me.
So this has to do with reefs. And we've had a situation in the Caribbean where reefs, which are very important for ecological balance and also for the fishing industry or food resources, they are big, almost in the middle of the ocean. And that area is now under serious attack because of the tourist industry who are breaking up the corals and so on. So this article, which is from the Dominican Republic, is the headline is, "As Reefs Vanish, Assisted Coral Fertilization Offers Hope in the Dominican Republic." I've been to a couple countries in the Caribbean, Aruba, St. Martin. What some people have done to reproduce the effect of the reef is to throw old vehicles in the ocean and so on, as a way of creating the effects of the reef. But that itself may have some kind of impact on the environment. So this is some new approach. As reefs vanish, assisted coral fertilization offers hope in the Dominican Republic. In an underwater nursery just off the Dominican Republic coast, tiny corals born in a laboratory are slowly growing under the eye of conservationists conservationists. Okay, so the article says, from, hold on, I missed the article.
I'm saying that one of the things, but I could say that this is one story from last year that's
Right,
still
okay, oxygen tank strap to his back. Michael Del Rosario moves his fins delicately as he glides along an underwater nursery just off the Dominican Republic. A technique that's gaining momentum in the Caribbean to counter the drastic loss of corals due to climate change, which is killing them by heating up oceans and making it more difficult for those that survive to reproduce naturally. So that is the end of the article there, right? Yeah, so it's this new approach to creating corals in the corals are very important to coastal and ecological balance.
Sister Esther?
Yeah, very interesting story that talks about this sort of, in a way, it's like IVF for corals. The science is real and the urgency is clear because it talks about 70% of Dominican reefs have less than 5% coral coverage. However, for me, when I hear the story, what's missing is that the article is a classic climate story that describes the consequences without naming causes, root causes or culprits. So oceans are warming because of fossil fuels, but whose fossil fuels? The industrialization of Europe and North America was built on wealth extracted from the Caribbean through enslavement and colonialism. So the same nations that created the climate crisis now offer Caribbean islands conservation projects while they continue to burn. So the Dominican Republic didn't heat the ocean. The piece frames reef loss as a shared global tragedy when it's actually a specific injustice with, again, those least responsible who suffer the most. Now, for me, this is definitely where I would bring in a planet repairs lens. From a cognitive justice perspective, the indigenous Taino and African-descended fishing communities held marine knowledge systems that sustained these reefs for centuries. Where are those voices in these conservation models? The science is led by NGOs using Western, meaning Eurocentric, laboratory techniques, while intergenerational ecological knowledge is reduced to perhaps a fisherman's nostalgic anecdote. And from a reparatory justice perspective, the cost of reef restoration should be borne by those who cause the destruction, not by small island developing states who are already kind of crushed by so-called debt. And from an environmental justice perspective, coral reefs are the Caribbean's climate infrastructure. Coastal protection, food security, livelihoods, their loss is not just a nature story, it's a survival story with clear perpetrators. And for me, the bottom line, you cannot IVF your way out of a reparations debt. Coral restoration without holistic reparatory justice that addresses the full continuum of what some of us refer to as the Maangamizi is treating the wound while the knife is still in.
Shay. Brother Akko, we have about 30 more minutes. So you could squeeze in another story and then probably list the names of the countries of the other story we are now and get for flesh out. And the headlines, please, and then get Sister Esther final thoughts on that story.
Okay, so the next story is an editorial in Guyana. Very important, because Guyana is very much in the news relative to oil boom and economic development. So the story is, headline is, Guyana's bottom line question is how it can optimize revenues after the multinationals get their cut. Begins, a heated debate is taking place regarding an overall poverty rate of 58% and an absolute poverty of 32% in Guyana. These numbers emerge from an IDB, Inter-American Development Bank study, using the labor force survey, which was conducted in 2021 by the Bureau of Statistics. Readers will recall that 2021 was at the height of the pandemic, and there was a major collapse of incomes in Guyana and across the world. Even though enclave oil production started 2 years before, the non-oil sectors were adversely affected by the pandemic. Hence, there would have been job losses and therefore higher poverty in that year. Remittances would have also declined, thereby accounting for lower overall income in 2021. Yes, the IDB added remittances to income in the labor force survey. The pandemic also pushed many, 11% of the formal workers, into the informal sectors where incomes are significantly lower. Therefore, the high poverty rate from 2021 survey must be seen as a state of transitory poverty, making the number not very useful for analysis and guidance. I am certain from my observations that poverty is low in 2025, but it is not eliminated. Maybe it never will. We could probably get to the philosophy in a later installment. The IDB study uses the income-based measure of poverty. However, we know there is a tendency for people to understate their income in surveys. It is for this reason that others use consumption-based poverty. There are also good economic reasons for using consumption-based poverty measures. For example, the principle of consumption smoothing tells us that true deprivation is what true deprivation is despite income fluctuations. Consumption is usually a better measure of deprivation relative to income because people usually understated the latter in surveys. The World Bank uses multidimensional poverty to better define poverty beyond income. MDP are deprivations in terms of limited nutrition, child mortality, years of schooling, housing, cooking fuel, drinking water, among others. According to the World Bank, 6.5% of Ghana's population was vulnerable to multidimensional poverty in 2019, a full year before the peak pandemic. Staying with income for a moment, another study by the World Bank determines the income-based poverty rate was 48% in 2019, a rate that declined from 61% in 2006. Right, so I will stop here because it is an important thing to understand, which is something I've said. I remember some years ago, let's just comment. Some years ago, a friend of mine, someone who I knew was an ambassador in one of the African countries. And he was touting all this growth and development in Africa, and they always come there and invest and so on. And I said to him, statistical information is not a measure of development. We have a saying in Trinidad, there are lies, damn lies, and statistics, right? And the example I use is, if there is a place where 1,000 people with very limited or no economic activity, it's going to say there's 100% increase in commercial activity. But that has nothing to do with the 800 other people who don't have water, who don't have so, and so we use these statistics from the World Bank and all of these places to measure our growth when they are not realities of the conditions of our real existence. So that's what I would say.
Thanks, Brother Akko. Lies, more lies and statistics.
No, it's lies, damn lies and statistics.
Esther?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the good things about this story is that it acknowledges that oil revenues will never be enough because, you know, people are going crazy about all this oil. So that's one of the good things. Now, for me, what's missing from this story is the candor about multinational extraction is immediately undermined by the conclusion that there is also not a better model, because that's really how the story concludes. And for me, this is the colonial mentality dressed in economic realism. Guyana, which is an African and indigenous nation, sitting on one of the world's largest oil discoveries, is being told by one of its own professors that accepting whatever the multinationals leave behind is the only option. So the entire framing of this news story accepts that ExxonMobil shareholders come first and the Guyanese people get the remainder. The article doesn't ask how Guyana arrived at such a lopsided contract, who negotiated it, under what pressures, in whose interests, and the history of how the IMF and the World Bank and international capital have systematically structured deals that disadvantage formerly colonized nations is treated as somewhat of a natural condition rather than an ongoing injustice. And so I think from a planet repairs lens, the throwaway reference to climate resilient housing treats the climate crisis as just one item on the development checklist rather than an existential threat that Guyana's own oil extraction is accelerating. And if I think about a cognitive justice angle, it would ask, why is Western shareholder capitalism treated as the only model when indigenous and African communal economic traditions in Guyana offer alternative frameworks for resource governance? So those are just some of the things that I think really stand out for me. The bottom line is that this story seems to be telling us there is not a better model. And this is quite problematic, I think, given people in the region's growing reparatory justice consciousness and the demands that are being made. You know, why should a nation which has been impoverished by centuries of colonial extraction now accept exploitative terms for its own natural resources?
Thanks, Sister Esther. Brother Akka, what are the countries that we did not cover and the headline stories from those countries?
We had something from Barbados and something from Trinidad, which I think I would like to read. At least have the one I have here is on Trinidad, actually. Could I go ahead and read it?
Quickly, Brother Akka, we have 5 minutes.
All right, so I'll just read the headline. Ruling party in Trinidad denies involvement in Barbados elections. There's a rumor that the Trinidad and Tobago government is working to ensure that Mayor Motley loses the elections. Because as you know, from a foreign policy perspective, Mayor Motley has been very much articulating positions inconsistent with the behavior, what I would call the shameful behavior of the Tobago government. Now, this statement was not made by the Prime Minister, but by one of our underlings, a minister called Barry Padder. Now, given the dubious and shameful role that the Prime Minister played in the undermining of Venezuelan sovereignty and the facilitation of the U.S. attempts to undermine the Venezuelan government, I would not be, I would not doubt that they may be behind the scenes playing a role to unseat Mayor Motley. So, given what they did in terms of the support for the U.S. policy in Venezuela. So that's a very important article. I think it's important. Trinidad and Tobago has now become walking lockstep with all U.S. policies and the dismantling of any kind of indigenous initiative in the country.
Sister Esther, quickly, because I know you have to say something about an call for a black woman.
Well, I'm actually going to be following this story with great interest, and it wouldn't surprise me that these machinations would be happening. I think the situation in Barbados is actually a lot more complex than what is presented, and I think it would be good to revisit this story as developments unfold.
Sister Esther, Brother Akka, you want to name your other stories then quickly and just say what
the other story is called a tax victory. It's out of Guyana again, and it deals with how the multinationals choose
that we have to contend with in the region.
Thanks, Sister Esther, and again, I just have deep appreciation for how your brain works and your thinking process and how comprehensive you are in your analysis especially as a reparationist. Big respect representing the Caribbean diaspora out of Barbados and Guyana. No worry about nothing, I hear a British accent, but deeply rooted in the African Caribbean value system. Brother Akka, final thoughts?
So, sister, the last comment, the last story that I wanted to read was on an increase of syphilis in Barbados. And it's very important to understand this is a health challenge based on the fact that we have tourism-based economies. So if you have a case where syphilis is increasing in Barbados, bet your life it is the same thing in Jamaica, Trinidad, which is carnival and it's wild behavior at times and so on. So we have to put this in the context of the use of disease, viral and bacterial warfare against people of African descent and indigenous peoples. We cannot separate this. So sometimes we may think these things are incidental, but they may not be incidental. So there has to be a new consciousness, a new awareness of the fact that there are people who have proven that they want to kill us. They did this in the past, and they may still have plans to do so in more what I call ingenious and subtle ways. So that's the point I wanted to.
And I want cap low by for it, right? So I watch and I walk fast because I want to catch bus. I say, hey, I know that me to try here, but I not answer because I don't see the bear battle in my hand. I said about 3 times, I still not answer, and I not answer. Imagine my shock when the man holla, Miss Creme! And then I turn back, right? Because I don't expect that. And I say, what going on? He say, the bike did go from side to side because it drink. The whole time, they don't got no light. So just thinking about light pollution, I just want to think that a real life story. And then for me, I got issues, right? So I always surprised, truly, when I'm Belizean out the road, recognize the work where we do behind zinc fence, and then people are not identifiable black people. It always surprised me. I mean, Belizean now a mixed up group of people, but they really tune in. And like one of the songs when Mose play Friday night, where TR Wright sing, zinc fence people that are realest people about, and I really, meaning working class people, and I really have great respect and admiration for working class people. I know I never hear I would talk about the Belize Communication Workers for Justice Advocacy for make the BTL pay them their severance money, but I want to host of the Vida Manning. We are stretch talking about it. I just want some big respect to especially working class people who organize in their own interests and they win. Throughout the history of people in the world, the Caribbean specifically, we have stories of working class people organizing and winning, but because we don't know the stories, we cannot be inspired by them. But we then advocate enough for our own interests and we keep allow political leaders, church leaders for make decisions for we're consistently not enough for we best interest. So Belizean people, we have a responsibility for learn, for study together and work together collectively in our own interest. This show will repeat at 5:30 this evening on XTV Belize channel. You could go to XTV Belize YouTube, XTV Belize Facebook, and listen to any one of we live programming and share the link. The security guard, I believe Brother Shane Flowers at XTV with Breddah Harlan Wagner was the MCO this morning, and downstairs in Comradio, Larry Gerry, known as Larry G, facilitated at Comradio. So big thanks again, Sister Esther Xosei, jurisconsult, reparationist, scholar activist out of England, the UK, African heritage out of Barbados and Guyana. Brother Akamotota, our long time over here, our co-host, revolutionary freedom fighter, conscious brother, enough respect for the sacrifices of both of them make for still there and for the share it way. Until next Sunday, only organize people and save the people.
Thank you, Sister YaYa. Thank you, Sister Esther.
Thank you both.
Nation. Country bad, love them homeland. We'll never give it up to another nation. This happy we don't fear. Nobody do it to nobody man. This happy we don't fear. Nobody do it to nobody man. This happy, my name is Pupa. Belize me come from the Belize City area. 110% Belize and proud of it. Don't tell me about Marin. slave master. Talking about the hip and the billies and dollar because patriots. All people who love them country bad love them homeland will never